So next up, we have Bernelle talking about some metaverse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, is this on? Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I may have overdid myself on this talk, and so I'm not sure how long it is. Anyway. Welcome. So the interoperability and the metaverse. When I designed this talk, or when I just looked through this talk the last time, I realized that this is the first and the last time I mentioned Debian. But I think it's the mentality of what Debian is that is this thick thread that goes through this talk. It's all about how Debian is interoperable with everything. And so I hope you see that. All of the pictures, it's a very new idea, so we couldn't do pictures yet, so all of these pictures are just randomly grabbed from the internet because they're pretty, and I did reference them to aid you in your deeper rabbit holes. And then before I continue, interestingly, when I gave this talk in Brazil, it was on exactly the same day, and it was Graham's birthday, and so obviously today it is Graham's birthday again, so happy birthday, Graham. Right, so today I'm going to talk about the metaverse and urban metabolism, the need for good open data to achieve that, what is this thing called the metaverse, and end with Web 3 versus Web 3.0. So I'm going to start with a very quick recap of my talk in 2019. And I did in the Ether pad put my links in if you want to go look at them. And just for reference, my talk looked like this last time, for completeness sake. Okay, let's try this. Okay, so my problem last time was we need data. We need the right sort of data, we need the right resolution of data, and we need data to help everyday people make better decisions about their lives. We did not have this in 2019, we still don't have this today. And so I went on an adventure to try and visualize, find this data. Well, at that point I assumed that at least the data is somewhere and we just need to find it and visualize it. And it's not really about solving challenges, it's about visualizing intractable challenges that cannot be solved, just to get better conversations to happen between the people who are at stake. It's sort of a preemptive conflict resolution step. And it's really about the everyday people, so less about policymakers, but about the humanity that's behind all of that. And if all else fails, I wanted to visualize beautiful maps. So my idea at the time was to build a game. So I went off on learning Blender, Godus, which is an open game engine, O3DE, which is a newly launched 3D game engine, I think endorsed by both the Linux Foundation and the OS Open Source Geo Consortium. Unreal Engine 5, which is meant for photorealistic game and movie animations, and if you're a fan of the Matrix movie, you would have seen this. It's really impressive, even though it's not my focus. And so all of this was amazing, but at some point down the line, I realized I don't really like games. I play really basic games, but this was really not for me. So the only thing that survived was this look of the Godus game, which is where the screenshot is from, and I decided that maybe we should try for a platform instead. And then I moved on to that platform needs to be a map. So I ventured into geospatial. Oh my word, was that exciting. I loved it. And I purposefully did not put a JavaScript-based map on here because I would spend all day getting into all sorts of other rabbit holes. Most of these are built with JavaScript, and so I just shared a lot of examples for you. I found many of them from Twitter's 30-day map challenge hashtags. And then there's some curated ones like Julian's and just my random retweets if you're interested. And then there's more scientific bases like OpenTopomap and several more scientific ones. And the European Union is really getting into this idea of a digital Earth as well. I also failed to mention at the beginning, I'm covering a lot, and if you get lost, it's okay. That's why my slides are online, so that you can go and look into it later. It's a lot. I did want to just showcase two that I just found particularly beautiful. And this one is Owen J. Powell using Mapbox. And if I could manage just to, so I mean, this is no relevance to the talk. I just think it's so beautiful that you have to show. So it's a 3D map, and then as you zoom in, you start seeing how the 3D-ness of it is. So these are the mountains around where we are today in Prizren in Kosovo. And the second one is a person who goes by the nick of Beyond Watts. And this layered look, so these are all created in Blender, and I just think that is so incredibly beautiful, and I want to learn how to do that too. Okay. And then also just a special shout out to Observable, and particularly Phil, who's my favorite Dataverse person in the whole wide world. Observable is a D3 JavaScript library, and Observable is a notebook type of website that hosts this JavaScript library. D3 stands for Data-Driven Visualization. And my three favorite people there is Phil, because he's so helpful and he just does such beautiful map visualizations. He's my hero. And then the CEO, Melody, and then the founder of D3, Mike Bostock. I just needed to send a special shout out to how visionary they are. And then originally I would have loved to have more mappy stuff in this talk, but I'm very much too much of a beginner for that. But I happen to be in Europe and able to go to FOSS4G, which is the open source geospatial conference hosted in Florence. The Italian name for that is Forense, which I only learned the other day, next month in Italy. And I would like to read this quote by Nadine Alamé, who's the CEO of the Open Geospatial Consortium, as it relates to the metaverse, which we will talk about a bit later. Geospatial is not something we talk the most about. It's not the hottest topic when we talk about the metaverse, but it is going to be one of these foundational technologies. Okay, so I figured out what platform I want, and it needs to be geospatial. Now, what data do we fill it with? And I think many people would say, but we have so much data. We have big data. So I want to show you an example of what this data looks like in the reality of things by going through an example of the Metabolism of Cities website. I love this initiative. I want to contribute to this initiative, so it's not a critique of them specifically, but it's just to show you what we're dealing with, if I can find the right thing. Okay, so this is the data hub for the Metabolism of Cities website. Let's go look at Singapore. So now what we're trying to do, not Hong Kong, what we're trying to do is find data and then link and make those data relevant to visualizing urban resource flows, what we want to do with them. Okay, so we can see we have 24 different data sets. So we should have lots and lots of data. Let's look at annual motor vehicle population by data type. Now I'm already getting a bit bored because now it's like so many links already. Oh God, here's more. Okay, now I've got something. What does that even mean? So it's data, but it's not useful. I don't think I can do anything with this. I'm going to have to do a lot more work and data polishing and cleanup to get this to relate to emissions, to the population, to climate change. There's no connection. It's not really relevant to me. So let's close that. So in short, it's just not good enough. Sorry. We do have other open data initiatives, and everyone, even Metabolism of Cities, is working towards a frictionless data, high-quality, machine-usable data that is also human-readable. And these are some examples of people working on that. Okay, so if we need better data, what does that look like? So obviously, the first thing is that it just needs to be available. Even if that is a photocopy of a handwritten note. Even better if it's structured data, if it's in a spreadsheet and not an image. Even better if it's non-proprietary. A CSV file is the, I think, current standard. Next, and now it's getting exciting, having URIs, unique, I've forgotten what the, unique reference identifier, something like that, to denote things, so that you can point at the data. So we don't have to go through those layers and layers and layers of clicks to get to the actual data that we want. And then the best thing, the 5-star angle, is linking your data to other data to provide context. So each point on a map, you know where that came from because it's linked to the other point, you know where it's going, you know what it relates to, and it's just this mass of well-organized data. The framework that guides that is a resource description framework. It's originally designed as a data model for metadata. So that's how data relates to each other. At this point, nothing to do with the metaverse. The statements about resources are in triplets. John feeds the cat. The subject, John, the cat, the object, and the predicate, what John does with this cat. Each of the 3 parts of the statements can be identified by a URI. We know where John comes from, we know how much he uses, we know where he, whatever you need, you know how much he eats, and so on. It's a simple, flexible data model with great expressive power. So each of these little units must be useful. But together, they can represent complex relationships and other things of interest, while also being appropriately abstract so that you can use them in other contexts. So what we want to do through this metaverse is to get that data into a format where we can use it. So if you look at this image, the raw data format is those points, those CSV files that we have. And then we, through a script or a program, which will be packaged in Debian, for example, will be converted and annotated so that it becomes linked, so that there's relationships between them. Then you map them so that you can understand what you're working with. So further model, and then where we want to start working is creating it into a metaverse format. So something that relates to the world, a visual overlayer to the real physical world. And then make that look beautiful is the last step. We're not asking public service providers to do this work. People are supposed to do their jobs. Police are supposed to help the citizens. It's not their job to get the data into a 5-star data format where everything is linked and it's in a semantic format. That's our job. I just want to make that clear because otherwise you start pushing envelopes all day long and your job is to deliver a service. But we can help with that. So that is starting to say what we want to do with this metaverse. And the way that we want this data, this is big data. The data that we have at the moment is entire municipalities, entire national data grids. What if I live in a street and I want to know what can I do to help my street flood less? Or there's a solid waste problem, what can I do? For that, you need a much smaller data set. Remember my problem? We don't have the data available for the person on the street to deal with their waste, with their water, with their flooding, with your energy use. We do not have a way to communicate between them. Well, this is where something called the solid box comes in. It's a self-hosted linked data box or pod. It's a user-controlled local storage point, independent of application providers. Jonas describes it as you spying on yourself. You are managing your data, and you can be as private or as public or as something in between as you like. The power is in your hands. It's based on the flexible interoperability framework of the web of data, and it promotes the autonomy of individuals, but also the transformation within organizations and ecosystems. And this little box is how we hope to generate user data. Users generate their own data to facilitate decision-making. So there's some more links if you want to read on this solid project. I'm still new to this. I only learned about this 2 weeks ago. But I think it's amazing. Okay, so we've got our framework with our map. We've got the means to produce good quality open data. Now, what is this metaverse thing? When you Google it, when you do a web search for it, you just see a lot of things about the metaverse. But the first thing I want to tell you is there's no the. There will never likely be only one metaverse. The way I see it, a metaverse is like your browser of choice. Your different worlds could be like Firefox or Google Chrome or Chromium or Safari. And once you're into that world, the different websites or your tabs is like buildings or portals or some sort of 3D thing that you can interact with and move and walk around in. It's like a virtual city, and that may or may not be linked to the real world. For ours, it probably will be. And then, because advertising is such a big annoyance in the current web, or Web 2 as we understand it, I think we could get advertising that contributes rather than distracts from the overall experience. So instead of a banner that just obscures your view and that pulls your data, you may have some beautiful dragon walking around, and this dragon has beautiful hair. And then when you look at the hair, you go, oh, do you want this hair? This is where you go to get a haircut like that. I don't know. From Tom Fiske's book, he classifies metaverses in 3 categories. There's gaming metaverses, like we already see with Second Life, Roblox, Fortnite, those things. But in the metaverse, those worlds should be able to talk to each other. So your avatar in Minecraft can walk over and go do something in Roblox, and you keep your assets that you accumulated in Minecraft to go to Roblox. Can you imagine what that would take from an interoperability perspective? Then you can also have commerce metaverses. So you go shopping in a mall, but the mall is virtual. You're at home, you're safe, you're happy, and you can go wherever you want to go and do your shopping. Or socialize. And then there are enterprise microverses, and I call it micro because they are very specific. It's like the training for firefighters or for disaster management. Before the disaster happens, you have a simulated environment. But with your headset on, you can do anything you want to do without actually putting yourself in danger in the real world. It could be shop floors, workshop floors, or industry floors that is modeled in a virtual environment so that you can see how things work without having to spend the money for that, for the real thing. Okay, but none of this actually exists yet. In 2019, I shared this picture from Magicverse. It's called Spatial Application Layers, where you can see you have the physical world and then the digital world, so mapped on top of it like a digital twin. And then you can have your various data sets, so public transport routes, your energy systems, your green areas, your communications, but also your emissions, things that's important to keep your city working well, all layered and modeled on top of this. They describe this as an emergent system of systems, bridging the physical with the digital in a large-scale, persistent manner within a community of people. Since then, and since Facebook has rebranded to Meta, this has just exploded. And so here's a couple, 8 definitions of what other people consider a metaverse to be. It can be immersive and or 3D and or social, but it's partly to do with the metaverse. It's more intuitive ways to connect and collaborate. It could be a training environment for people or for robots. We've already heard that it's the virtual and the physical world combined, but you may be able to move seamlessly somehow between the simulated and the real worlds. Gaming and also commerce, experiences, 3D movies that you can walk in and be part of the story, perhaps have a game experience at the same time. Or, quite a few people consider it only to be clickbait and hype. The quote that I like the most is by Bill Vass from AWS. And he says, I see this convergence happening between the gaming rendering, the simulation world, the retail virtual try-on world, like SnapLens is really good there already, the AR, VR world, and the movie rendering world. All mushed together. There's no distinction between what is a movie and what is a shopping experience. It is a wholesale optimization of the computing infrastructure, and this is where Debian comes in, which is why it's right to call the metaverse the next generation of the internet. Here's some good metaverse readings. They don't mention NFTs anywhere. They don't mention Bitcoin, so they're good. Shouldn't have said that. Cesium's Building the Metaverse podcast is amazing. It's mind-blowing. I highly recommend it. Tom Fiske has a newsletter, a very polite and low-key Discord forum, and his book, The Metaverse, A Professional Guide, has also recently been published. Matthew Ball has a series of blog posts which are essential reading to start off with, and his book was actually published yesterday. It's now publicly available. Okay, so now that I've introduced you to the metaverse and the need for good data, what does my metaverse look like? It's just a dream, so there's not really a lot of good pictures. But what I would really love to have is an alternative to what Facebook would have, or Meta. It's open source. Yes, immersive, interactive internet platform, but it's based on a topographic, 3D low-poly geographical rendering of Earth. So a real map, but a playful map, a beautiful map that allows geographically independent, full participation in remote work and e-commerce. And I'm specifically thinking about the African context, about people who cannot just jump on a plane and fly to wherever they need to go, because visas, because time, because family commitments. And does that mean that we as Africans have to be excluded from the global playfield? Why not just do it in a digital format? We've had so much experience in what that could be in the last 3 years during lockdown. And I want this to be playful. Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the internet, said that the web is a more social creation than a technical one. I designed it for a social effect, to help people work together, and not as a technical toy. And I feel like we're forgetting that lately. It's becoming very depressing being on the internet. And we've heard talks these past few days about security and privacy, and it's just, let's remember how it could be. So for me, how I would like to do that, firstly, start just with a website. So it's not really 3D, it's sort of like an approximation, and they call that 2.5D, the geo-related data visualization website. And we plan to do these in phases, but like maybe a little bit in parallel. I've got the ideas here, and I need to get a technical team to help me do this. Then a small self-hosted metaverse. It's small enough to live on my own computer and just, to play with and to test the technical ability. Once that's working, take it back to, let's say, the urban metabolism website, where we can start bringing in all that data from cities and create a research metaverse, if you like. Okay, Jonas wants to go to parties and have his friends join him in his metaverse. So then the third phase would be an avatar metaverse where you have your social angles. And then lastly, perhaps bringing all of this together for an e-commerce metaverse where you can do all your shopping, or at least some of your shopping. Okay, so let me relax. The first one is basically what I would call a 3D OpenStreetMap. So it's built on OpenStreetMap and probably something like A-Frame.js, including the topography. So you have those hills that I showed you from Owen's Mapbox example. It's built for work and play, but really it's about making geospatial related art, visualization caricatures. Then, my GOML metaverse. So this is where we get the development right for this metaverse to fit with the topography. No buildings yet, no avatars, no people, no shopping. It's probably deployed on Vercadia, which I'll talk about in a moment. And these assets can be exported into other metaverses, which I'll also mention later. And in case you were wondering, oops, daisy, I lost it. GOML means get off my lawn. Right, so Vercadia is an open source metaverse. I could try and start it up, but it's going to take too long, and I forgot. So this is a screenshot from what it looks like inside. So you can run it in a website, so you don't have to have a virtual reality headset. But you can also enter it where the whole world is around you, these rolling hills and your friends and houses. I do recommend you going to have a look at it, and it's you can download it, and we're going to try and package it into Debian to see how well the closed source and the open source and the enterprise solutions work together. It's hard to explain what it is, so I suggest you just go try it out. Right, secondly, the urban metabolism metaverse. So now we have our topography based on this map, but now we're also introducing buildings. Still no avatars, no people, no shopping. This may be small enough to be self-hosted, perhaps not for an individual, but for a company or an organization to help us with research and science. And so, for example, with that building, with this city, you could probably get all your transport and the connections with stormwater, wastewater, emissions, etc. And you could do scenario planning, like what happens in a drought, what happens in a fire, in a very realistic way. So Jan Kiska from Siemens gave a talk yesterday, I think. And the way that he was talking about about Siemens public infrastructure services hinted at the great data generation possibilities. So what these cities are already generating makes it so possible to have an urban metabolism metaverse. But the complexity is that Siemens is a commercial enterprise, as an example, contracted as a public service that generates IoT data in the Internet of Things tied to public infrastructure. As a side effect, so their purpose is to deliver public services, but as a side effect, they generate data. What happens to that data? They may have a potential commercial interest in that data, but it's public data. There's a possible desire to hide this data purely because it becomes so difficult to manage the privacy and security concerns. But we need the publicly relevant data to help us plan for where we're going, for example, with climate change. We need to know how to model cities and do it properly and openly to take the best way forward. It's not good enough to have a binary decision about data, or private or not private. We need a more sophisticated conversation about data. There's layers of data. People have choice about what parts of their data needs to be public and private. And we need to figure that out. And again, at this conference, there has already been many talks about how do we do that. So this is very early on in the game and very complex. Right, so thirdly, the social aspect of the metaverse. And the best way I can describe this is like a free and open VR chat that is packaged in Debian. It has all the functionalities plus the avatars. Now you can bring your friends in and have a social experience. The important thing here is that it is free as in the 4 freedoms. What is the 4 freedoms? The first one is the freedom to run the program as you wish for any purpose. There is no walled garden here. Secondly, you can take that program apart. You can study how it works and change it so that it does your computing as you wish. You can fork this metaverse and do whatever you want with it. Access to the source code is needed for this. You can share your metaverse so that other people can use it however they want. And then lastly, you can modify this metaverse and then distribute it and share it to whatever else other people want. Importantly, also the design and the artwork. 100% free does not mean you're forced to give your data away, your artworks or your designs, but it means you are free to choose whether you want to keep it private or share it. And that creates a bigger ecosystem of working together, the way that I believe the internet was intended to be shared. Right, so lastly, we have the e-commerce metaverse. So this is all the functionalities we've spoken about before, plus e-commerce. I sometimes get a question about, why do you want open and science, and now you're going down this e-commerce road? Don't they not work together? The thing is that e-commerce is popular. And if you have enough money through your enterprise activities, you can sustain your ideological activities much better. Science is always on the back burner. Nobody cares about science anymore. They distrust it. But if you can allow people to just wander across the science and be curious while they do their shopping, I think we can get a lot further and combat, for example, misinformation much better by meeting people where they are. For this, we will aim for 100% free, of course, but there's always tension with enterprises. And looking at that last freedom, we cannot say what people will do once they modify and distribute the code. So there may be a less free fork down the line. And of course, data ownership becomes the same big issue here again. So here I just want to do a quick plug for a colleague of mine. He works at the CSR, the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research in South Africa, and they are working on a project of enabling commerce inside the metaverse. So they're working on all of this, which is great because I don't know or really care that much. But we do want to get to a point where they do the right thing, because that is a risk that we have at the moment, that there's a lot of growth in this area, and it's all sort of down the wrong avenues. So they're working on a general metaverse where users can rent and customize virtual space and conduct commerce. So they're offering product or service offerings. And then the interesting payment model is per second. So if you think about on-demand streaming and stuff like that, but it's on a peer-to-peer manner. And so it's much faster and better. You'll have to ask him about it. And then he has things like non-custodial wallets and smart contracts, which I have to be honest, I don't understand that much about. This is a very new project. We only started in June of this year. So there is scope to get involved and help them. So this is the picture, and here we do talk about NFTs, non-fungible tokens. They're looking at payments and they're looking at self-sovereign identity. If you do want to get involved and help us build a better web, please contact us. Carl's contact details are there on that slide. So now that I've spoken about NFTs, and I haven't mentioned crypto or Bitcoin, but really that's where we're working towards, there's a sort of an unease. And so it's time, I just wanted, with the closing of this talk, to spend a little bit of time talking about the difference between Web 3, which is equivalent to the semantic web, and Web 3.0, which is the blockchain web, what we hear about the crypto, Bitcoin stuff that you hear on the news. And for starters, my only criticism of blockchain that I want to explicitly say is that it's like a hammer. So when all you have is a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. So firstly, the blockchain terminology. People in Debian and software in general is quite familiar with ledgers, which is simply an ordered list of events. A distributed ledger is one that is shared and replicated across machines or files. A blockchain is a very specific type of that distributed ledger that needs all sort of energy, transactions to stay secure, and Bitcoin is a very specific type of that blockchain. A blockchain is useful to establish binding agreements between parties that cannot trust each other without a centralized mediator. A blockchain is not useful when there is no disagreement, if it's a unique physical good, if only one party writes, when parties trust each other, when parties trust a central mediator, like a well-functioning government, or when parties trust authorities. Blockchain can provide incentives and trust for decentralized computations. And if you want to learn more, there's a very good presentation by Ruben Verburg that is linked in this presentation. And so, yeah, you could read more about that. And then there's good critique, useful critique by Cory Doctorow and E. Glenn Weil for your perusal. Okay, so that's all good and well. Why am I talking about this? Web 3, or this blockchain web, the thing that we can both agree on is that the way that the world is working is currently not working well. There needs to be a rebalancing of centralization and decentralization. So that, the FOSS project and the blockchain people 100% agree on. What we disagree on is how to achieve that. Web 3.0, or the blockchain-minded, wants to abstract it into a universal trust, where all responsibility is taken away and it's just cemented into programmatic signatures. Very energy expensive, and it takes all your power away. So, and then Web 3, the semantic web, where Debian comes in, is stability through collaboration. It's a web of trust. It's about relationships. It's a completely different ideology. And the alternative to this redundancy of blockchain, where all of your responsibility gets taken away into a computer, is something called subsidiarity, however you want to say it. And this is a way where we work together and make decisions at the level where it impacts us the most. But importantly, not lower than that. So some things a central government need to look after, like a power grid. But some things, like how you beat your geyser, is your responsibility. How you decide what is in your green space in your community is your responsibility, but with input from other levels of government. So it is trying to keep it as decentralized as it should be, but no more. And for that, Cory Doctorow's article is also very good. It takes a while to wrap your mind around this, and he has links inside that article that's also very useful. So what does it mean to be open source? And why do we want this metaverse to be open? So the thing about closed source is it's very pretty. I can imagine that when Meta publishes eventually to the non-Europeans their Horizon worlds, it'll be beautiful. I can't wait to see it. And it's going to be easy to use because they spend a lot of time on social research. We know, like, I still have a Facebook account. It's nice. But then you can't do anything else with it. You can't choose how you want to play with it. So it gets like a bit frustrating. Free and open source, on the other hand, is pretty incomprehensible when you get it out of the box. And that's frustrating. But then you can do anything you like with it after that. Neither of these are bad. You just need to understand what you're dealing with. Both have limits. So for more reading on open source is the Debian Free Software Guidelines, the open source definition, which is the same thing but slightly different. Welcome to open source. And this good article from Porto University in Portugal on the value of open standards and how it can help enabling interoperability. So in short, what I want to do with this metaverse is get people to come together to solve common shared problems such as infrastructure. And I mean, isn't that exactly what Debian does? So this is like the next beautiful visual layer of Debian. And free and open source software enhances that trust that we need in interoperability through transparency. Okay, so who wins? I'm not saying open source always wins. I'm saying that we need to look at both sides and see what we can learn from how people are currently re-looking all of this from so many different angles. Technology can change your political outlook, and that's both a good thing and a warning. And if you want to learn more, there's a podcast by Danny O'Brien where he talks about this. Okay, and then there's so much out there and so many new things. How do we know if something is legit? There's so much hype out there. You need to think about what do you want? And this counts for Debian as much as any other project. Do you have a real use case that you want to address? Are the people involved good? And by good, you need to look at what else have they been involved in? Have there been any controversies? What do they talk about on Twitter? What do they do? It's about relationships and time. We've become so impatient. Good things take time. And good things stand the test of time, but not always in the way, they change a lot, they move a lot, but they're still around in some way or another. Okay. So I want the metaverse to improve how we work with a city's metabolism, how we get a city to work properly. I need good open data to achieve that, and for that we need linked data, and we need it at an appropriate level, like at the users, and we need appropriate privacy concerns and security. The metaverse is this beautiful visual dream that can help these things come together and help us collaborate in a beautiful way. And it's sort of like the next version of the internet, whatever that means. And that next version of the internet could be any number of things, but we shouldn't be too quick to throw away the different ideologies that is out there fighting for airspace at the moment. So my closing opinions. I did not know 3 years ago that this was even possible in the remotest way. It's doable, and it's a good time. Just, for example, with 3D geospatial, it's only just emerging because it's a whole nother layer of data. And I'm so excited to be part of this. Data is becoming even more important to create this world that we want to interact with. We need to do it right. It's not good enough to say that it's just difficult. We need to tackle it. I'm very excited about the metaverse, but it also comes down to a battle for the soul of the internet. But having said that, we need to keep the door open to learning. Over the past couple of years, I've grown to fully embrace not being popular. being weird, being a geek, being a hacker. And I hope you embrace that too. It's the quiet, hidden, right thing to do. So lastly, I just wanted to thank Jonas and Siri for many hours of discussions. And then the more you talk about people, the more people help. And also just for Robin, who's my business partner, who's supporting all of this. I'm so excited to be building cool shit with you, man. And then just all the beautiful geospatial designers out there. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks, Bernelle. We have 5 more minutes. Any questions?
So as long as we don't have an actual question, I would actually go with a motivational side point. One of the points in your slides was that, well, those metaverses don't exist yet. Well, they do, especially on the commercial metaverse side, where there is already existing software from NVIDIA. It's called NVIDIA Omniverse, that is used to plan factories, other kind of like buildings and structures inside of them. And there's a big current just published example that there's going to be a BMW factory in Hungary that is currently already running and producing cars in this Omniverse. And so they are using this software, they're using it to fully fledge out how the production is going to be, like which parts of the production generate heat, where it goes, where the air conditioning units for that might be. Then the people that will work on those lines can actually use VR headsets to see, okay, I'm going to be doing this here. Oh, I need some socket here for this device that I'm going to be using. And they can modify that on the fly in the factory design. So it's already here in the commercial space. And if we don't want to be left behind in the open source side, it's probably time to start thinking about this as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. I've linked to the news release after Jan had his talk. So one thing is that these are not interoperable, so they're sort of gated little communities, which is fine. It's absolutely fine. But what if you need stuff from out of there? And that's where the interoperability comes from. This little microverse of NVIDIA is not interoperable with anything else. And secondly, I think we need to look at the long game. Ours will probably be ugly and boring for a long time, maybe forever, if you look at what the commercial people are working on. It is absolutely insane and mind-blowing. But at some point, the consequences of all of this will come home, and then we need an alternative that is ready. And that is why I say, quietly, let's hack in the background and let's have fun, so that when we need that solution, it's there.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. People on IRC, thank you for this beautiful presentation. It was like really beautiful and the great ride to a metaverse. I had beautiful dreams already. So thank you, everyone. Give her a give round.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.